Hey soldiers, a day of reckoning is fast approaching with regard to energy scarcity. Now, we need to ask ourselves, how do we make money off of this situation? And there is a golden opportunity out there. Of course, you're going to have to do your due diligence, but we're certainly going to talk about it. Now, what am I getting at? Well, all the indications are pointing toward more expensive, less available energy sources, especially in terms of oil. Now, we all know that the Russians are under sanctions. Russia is also an important member of OPEC Plus. But check this out. They're not able to produce as much oil, so that actually puts them in a better position financially. Russia claims it can maintain oil production at only 9.9 million barrels per day, significantly below its OPEC Plus quota. Russia expects to keep its production at 9.9 million barrels per day in October. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak said Wednesday, citing production volumes that are more than 1 million barrels per day below Russia's current target under their deal with OPEC+. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Wednesday that Russia would keep oil production and exports at that level until 2025, vowing not to give up what he considered to be his world-leading position in the global energy markets despite sanctions. You can throw as many sanctions on Vladimir Putin as you want. When these temperatures dip and that thermometer goes south, people are going to break out the pitchforks, especially if they see those European Parliament members. You know how you drive past a house and you know the heat is on because there's steam coming up out of the chimney or the pipes. You let some of these Europeans, especially these Germans that just finished knocking themselves out, damn near having a cardiac arrest because they're chopping firewood, drive past one of these bigwigs' houses. You let that happen enough times, okay, you're going to see it right here on YouTube. We are at the same level, 9.9 million barrels per day. We currently have stable production. Novak represents Russia at the OPEC Plus meetings, and he said that in a forum in Moscow on Tuesday. So how does this actually help Russia? Well, it's very simple. They won't have to reduce any production, so they'll benefit from the higher prices that are coming because the rest of OPEC Plus is going to reduce. They're going to reduce their production. And let's get into that. So OPEC is actually saying that their demand forecast is lower. Now, I don't really get this. I'm not an oil magnate, but as expected, OPEC aggressively slashed projections for both global demand and the amount of crude it will need to pump this quarter. Now, you're already seeing an opportunity there, okay? Maybe Warren Buffett, it had Warren Buffett. I mean, he's got that all shucks attitude and that fake folksy nature of his, but the man knows how to make money. And he went in there and upped his stake in Occidental Petroleum from 16% to 50%. And now all of these revelations are coming out about oil being taken off the market, thereby becoming more valuable. They made the case for their output cuts, and they've cited that they see lower demand going into 2023. In its latest monthly report, OPEC revised down its estimate of global oil demand growth for 2022 by 460,000 barrels per day, citing China's COVID lockdowns, economic headwinds in developed economies, and inflationary pressures everywhere. OPEC now sees world oil demand growing by 2.6 million barrels per day this year to average 99.7 million barrels per day globally. The cartel also cut its required production in the fourth quarter by 440,000 barrels a day. Similarly, OPEC also slashed its oil demand growth forecast for 2023 by 360,000 barrels per day, expecting growth at 2.3 million barrels per day next year. Demand growth would be subject to headwinds given uncertainty that surrounds the global economic outlook and factors related to the pandemic. So OPEC is getting ready to make some more money. Okay, if you produce gold toilets, gold Kalashnikov rifles, or fast cars, hey, you're about to get a little growth spurt here, because the Saudis love that kind of stuff, man, and they're going to be getting a lot richer. And, they see opportunity, so shouldn't you? What am I talking about here? Well, if we look at the sources of energy by consumption, we see that the evil petroleum and the evil coal and the nefarious natural gas make up the vast majority of where we get our energy from in this country. Now, we already know that they want to get rid of coal. The Democrats have been talking about that forever. Oil as well. And look, let's be honest, they are finite sources. Renewables like solar and wind, they're just not cutting the mustard, okay? They have their application, don't get me wrong. And as technology advances, sure, those could become more viable sources to give us a lot more energy availability. Right now, they are nowhere near, as you can see, at 12% for renewables, all renewables, okay? This is everything. Solar just comes in at 12% of the 12%, okay? Geothermal, 2%, wind, 27%. And I wouldn't even call hydroelectric renewable. And here's the reason why. Look at the trouble that California is having because of drought. So that water is cannot always be relied upon to be there to spin those turbines, okay, as we're seeing right now. Look at the situation with Lake Mead. So all of the renewables combined, wind, solar, everything is not nearly approaching even 15% of what we need to run this country. Creates a hell of an opportunity for nuclear. Nuclear, as you can see, is 8%. I firmly believe that more and more people, more policymakers are going to come to the conclusion that the only way that we can grow these new technologies, wean ourselves off of technologies and sources that are finite, and still power this society, is to give nuclear a bigger role. Now, the question you have to ask yourself with that is, well, how do you make money off of nuclear? Well, for one thing, most of these plants are uranium powered. Now, unlike gold, you can't keep uranium in your house. Wouldn't work out too well for you. In fact, you probably get a knock on the door from several government agencies. But you can invest in it. Let's make the case for nuclear as the most efficient form of clean energy. In Sweden, an old oil-powered gas plant is being fired up more regularly after the Scandinavian nation decommissioned several nuclear reactors. So getting rid of those nuclear reactors has made them have to go back to oil, and that's what they want to get away from, right? Maybe shutting down those nuclear reactors was not the best idea. California recently announced that it will ban the sale of new gasoline-powered cars in a little over a decade. Shortly thereafter, California asked residents to avoid charging electric vehicles due to electricity shortages. The Golden State is now reneging on its planned closure of the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. Turns out shutting down a source of 8% of California's power was not a bright idea. Nuclear energy is the only way to transition off of fossil fuels while retaining our high standard of living and quality of life. Elon Musk understands this. He recently tweeted, quote, "Countries should be increasing nuclear power generation. It is insane from a national security standpoint and bad for the environment to shut them down." Elon's right. Shutting down nuclear power is bad for the environment. So not only is it bad for the economy, it's also bad for the environment. Research institutions have found that the most efficient net zero power grid requires nuclear energy. Uranium currently provides over 50% of America's carbon-free power. Nuclear energy works 24/7, unlike many renewable sources of energy. Of course, when the sun goes down, You're reliant on battery power for solar, and that doesn't work in, some of the latitudes here on Earth with extended nighttime hours. That has a limited application, the battery power. The wind doesn't blow all the time, so you've got an issue with generating power with regard to wind turbines. So nuclear, it's that energy is always being emanated, as evidenced by the sun, which is a gigantic, continuous nuclear reaction. Musk is right. Look, from the standpoint of national defense and national security, it is insane for us not to be energy independent. Look at Europe. Okay, they're learning that lesson right now because of their dependence on Russia for their energy. Russia, and to an extent us, the United States. We export energy sources to Europe. 20% of American homes run on nuclear power, and almost 60% of the uranium used for fuel or clean energy nuclear power plants comes from former Soviet Union countries, including Russia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. We do have some here in America as well. In fact, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, famously made a deal with Russia to provide them with some of the uranium that we manufacture. A secure nation is not reliant on others for power, and if these Green New Deal policies continue to shape American legislation, our national security will undoubtedly be at risk. Germany has learned the lesson brutally after crafting their poorly designed green energy system, which left them totally reliant on Russia for fuel. Germany now has to make some tough choices on the energy needs. Basically, let our people freeze to death or come crawling back to Russia with our tail between our legs and advocate for the relaxation of some of the sanctions. The United States can avoid this fate. Not just the United States. Other countries can too. France had been talking about bringing some of its nuclear power plants back online because of their need for energy independence or some semblance of it. So this is a realization that we're starting to see. Nuclear accidents like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, which happened back in the 70s here in America, those still are fresh in the minds of many, many people throughout the world. And of course, a nuclear accident is a scary thought. We also have Fukushima. Now, Fukushima was a result of what happened with the tsunami. Okay, so that was more a natural disaster, whereas Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island had less of that and more of a man-made cause. So if you take those three, we can say 66% of those happen due to things that we have since learned to prevent, okay, with our technology. So let's get to the meat of the matter. How do you invest in this? I think that, again, there's a realization that uranium is going to be important because nuclear power is going to need to be one source that we maintain and grow. Now, that's what I think. Do your due diligence and see if you think the same thing. And I'm just going to, call out some of the ways you can invest in nuclear right now. Again, you cannot bring any uranium home and put it in your basement. Not a good idea. But of course, one of the things you could do is you could take a look at uranium stocks. If you decide to take on the risk in hopes of a potential reward, one way to invest in uranium is to buy uranium-focused mining stocks such as Cameco. They're bringing it up out of the ground, right? Kazatomprom, that must be one of the former Soviet companies. Ticker symbol KAP. Smaller uranium producers include Energy Fuels and Ur-Energy. Diversified miners also extract substantial quantities of uranium, include BHP Group and Rio Tinto. All right, so they're diversified, meaning they're bringing up other things out of the ground as well. Do your due diligence. I'm just, giving you some information. I'm not suggesting that you invest in any particular thing. I will also say with the diversified miners, that gives you some wiggle room in case, it takes these policymakers years to figure out what we need to do is start to construct more nuclear power plants and maintain the ones that we have. keep them in good order. So if you're a diversified miner, you're bringing up gold, you're bringing up silver, you're bringing up some things that can, spread that risk around. There are also uranium exchange traded funds. Those who want exposure to the mining sector as well as other players in the nuclear energy industry without having to pick individual uranium stocks can go the route of exchange traded funds, which invest in baskets of stocks but trade under a single ticker symbol on an exchange. North Shore Global Uranium Mining ETF buys shares in companies involved in mining, exploration, development, and production of uranium, and those that hold physical uranium, uranium royalties, and other non-mining assets. Van Eck Vectors Uranium plus Nuclear Energy ETF, ticker symbol NLR, invest in miners, nuclear utilities, nuclear power plant builders, and businesses that supply the nuclear power industry. So the ETFs are out there. Now, we've talked about Rick Rule on the channel before. Now, he has a physical uranium fund. Another way to get financial exposure to the underlying commodity of uranium is with Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, the only publicly listed physical uranium fund on the market. Units can be bought or sold just like stocks, and each one represents a physical amount of uranium held by Sprott. As of January 7th, the Sprott Trust had amassed 42.7 million pounds of uranium, up from 18.1 million pounds when the fund launched in July. All right, so those are a few ways that you can take advantage of this growing, what I believe to be will be a growing trend is looking back at nuclear. And when they say Sprott launched in July, they were talking about July of 2021. Okay, just to be accurate. Another way that you can take a look at opportunities involving the nuclear power generation industry is by looking at those companies that actually create and build the reactors and maintain those reactors. General Electric is one. General Electric, Hitachi, they're U.S. Japan kind of conglomerate that focuses on this. Look at that. General Electric has had a lot of trouble in the past years because they have been horribly mismanaged. But I don't know. Maybe that's behind them. You'll have to do your research and get comfortable. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. KEPCO is out of South Korea. Now, these might be the types of funds where you have to get the depository note if they are not listed directly in the United States. But do your due diligence. I'm just giving you a lay of the land. And finally, with regard to the companies that provide energy, okay, those are the electric utilities, the electric and gas utilities that provide end users with that energy at the end of the line. So we've got Constellation Energy, Dominion Energy, Exelon, which is kind of the company that covers this area, Pacific Gas and Electric, on and on and on and on. Okay, so those are some ways that you can take advantage of what's going on. The powers that be have pretty much wrecked the energy industry, at least for the time being. But you can rest assured that just like human beings need real estate, okay, because we need to build shelters on that real estate so that we can stay out of the elements. Essentially, that's what residential real estate is about at the end of the day. We need energy as well. Otherwise, we will be relegated to the dark ages, literally. And I think that there's a lot of growth potential in nuclear as we wean ourselves off of these traditional sources like coal and oil. All right, yesterday we put out a very controversial video talking about why you should not trust the government with your number one asset, your human body, because of some revelations that have been made by a major pharmaceutical company of late. Go and watch that video. Check it out. Understand what we're getting at there, if it's still there. I don't believe Google likes this kind of talk. But what can they do about it when Pfizer itself is the one stating the information? Guys, I'll talk to you soon.